to be talking about BAFTA predictions, the predictions for who's in and who's out at the upcoming BAFTA Awards for nominations. So they are going to announce them very early Thursday if you're in the US, or very late Wednesday if you're in the UK. It kind of rolls down to basically something like that. Anyhow, so I think I have these listed by the category name, something like that, on the BAFTA list on the official website. Save for some of the top categories, those I have toward the end. So we're going to go that way. And at the end of this, we'll also look at my predictions for who's going to have the most nominations. And we'll go over that. Okay, so we'll start with the actually with the Best British Film category, which is the only one that's going to have 10 nominees this year. And by alphabetical order, I have it going to these 10 films that were long-listed. All of Us Strangers, The Deepest Breath, How to Have Sex, Napoleon, Poor Things, Rye Lane, Saltburn, Scrapper, Wonka, and The Zone of Interest. And this is really the only category I don't have like some could-be contenders, because the rest of them I'm not very familiar with. And really the ones that are not like around the Oscar conversation, so that'd be like Scrapper and Rye Lane. These are ones that also got a couple spots somewhere else on the long list, so that's why they're here. And I've done this mistake in the past since they've started doing a couple of these long lists, where some of those films that, look like they're going to do really well and they're long listed in a lot of categories, if they're not like a major Oscar contender, I'll usually throw them into one or two additional categories. I tried to avoid that this year. Probably the one exception would be All of Us Strangers, of course, but yeah. So that's that one. Let's move on to film not in the English language. My nominees here, and this is a really tight category. I have it being Anatomy of a Fall, Past Lives, The Society of the Snow, Teacher's Lounge, and The Zone of Interest. So I'm leaving out The Taste of Things, I'm leaving out Fallen Leaves, I'm leaving out Boy and the Heron. Those are all very, very possible here. Even 20 Days in Mariupol, I don't think is too far off here. This is going to be one of the tougher categories to predict at the Oscars, too. Which is, I think, a welcome change, because in the last few years, I feel like this, whether it's international feature, whatever they called it at the Oscars, it's always been like, okay, one or two surprises, but the rest we all knew. This year, it's like, okay, we know Zone of Interest, and we know nothing else. It's like, that's really the only one at this point that's like absolutely 100% locked in. And virtually all the other ones that are in contention, all of them could fall by the wayside when we get to the Oscars. But here at BAFTA, yeah, this is what I'm going with here. And a lot of those four that I'm leaving out, Taste of Things, Fallen Leaves, Boy and the Heron, and 20 Days in Mariupol, all of them do have a legitimate shot of being nominated. And again, for the ones that I think are secure in this category, I'd go probably Anatomy of a Fall is really secure here. And The Zone of Interest is secure as well for film not in the English language. But yeah, I'm just not 100% sure if any of the other three are like, absolute guarantees. But I think they're all in a form or another of conversation going forward. So yeah, that's why I went with those. In the cinematography category, my five here are Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. I'm leaving out Barbie. It's close. Rodrigo Prieto, I think they're going to favor Killers of the Flower Moon here. I could be dead wrong, though. I don't know. Napoleon did pretty well on the long list here, and it's actually one that we think is going to be in contention for at least one or two Oscars. And then Saltburn I have as a possibility here. And Saltburn, again, I would not be totally shocked if we see this pull something where it actually does a little better here at BAFTA than it does the rest of the awards season. Yeah, but those are my five there. In costume design, I have Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Napoleon, Poor Things, and Wonka getting in. The other three possibilities are Asteroid City, Saltburn, and Maestro. And I did not throw actually Oppenheimer onto this list. This is one of the few categories that I think Oppenheimer is probably going to struggle with here at BAFTA. I don't think it's totally like not on the radar at all, but I just think some of these other ones, like Asteroid City especially, could be one that could garner a spot a little easier than Oppenheimer. We'll move on to the film editing category. Here my nominees are Anatomy of a Fall, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. The three that could get in, All of Us Strangers is the first one I'm going to list here. This is definitely a big spot where that film can make a splash right as Oscar voting is starting to begin. So those that are getting late to that film, it's done all right here in the limited box office run here in the U.S. But again, I'm not sure how many other screenings have gone on. It's been around some of the fall festivals and stuff, so it's not totally sight unseen as it's getting its release here in this late December into January period here. So I think that one could land. Barbie, I have as a possibility here in film editing. It could land. And Maestro as well, but I'm a little shakier on that one. Maestro, I don't think is going to fare extremely well here at BAFTA. Arguably, this could be alongside the Globes, the one place, because it doesn't, it might not have as much big support in these tech categories. So alongside the Globes, this could be one of the poorer performances we see from Maestro. For makeup and hair, my 5 nominees here are Barbie, Golda, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Golda is the one I'm putting in there, and I actually don't feel too bad about it. It's on the short list at the Oscars as well, and I think it's a box. Once they tick it here, they could pretty easily tick it at the Oscars as well. Could be nominees include Ferrari, Killers of the Flower Moon, and Napoleon. Killers of the Flower Moon was also one that jumped out at me when it was on the short list at the Oscars, so I could definitely see that one getting nominated there. And Napoleon, just off its strength here at BAFTA, could get in over something like Golda or even Barbie. Moving on to the original score category, or I think it's just best music or something over here. They don't have a song category. But this is a spot you got to give Barbie a nomination because it doesn't have the songs to back it up. So even though it might not land this category at the Oscars for original score, or technically scoring, or whatever the hell they would call it, with the songs and stuff, I think they're going to give a spot to Barbie here. Don't forget, a few years ago we did see Star is Born nominated here in this spot. Then we had Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and I'm actually going to go Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse here as my 5th pick. I'm leaving out Napoleon, I'm leaving out Wonka, and I'm leaving out Indiana Jones. Those are ones that I think are in the mix, but I don't feel too bad about those 5 for the music category. Production design is up next. Here I have Asteroid City, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. Not too bad about this one. Could be nominees include Wonka, The Zone of Interest, and Maestro. Again, The Zone of Interest. Look for this to be the spot for Zone of Interest to do pretty well here at BAFTA. This is the spot, I think, where it can definitely get into that range that last year All Quiet on the Western Front got into. That's where that one really started to take off. And I think it actually led or tied for most nominations here. 14 last year or something like that. I don't see Zone of Interest getting that high, but I certainly see a pattern there where Zone of Interest, it's been consistently here in really just the foreign language film category and all the variations of it at these early awards. Then BAFTA hits, that's where Zone of Interest, I think it's definitely going to get its highest count here. And then the Oscars, it'll settle back down a little bit, but it'll still, I think, do just fine. So this could be a spot where Zone of Interest sneaks in as well. In the visual effects category, I have The Creator, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, Napoleon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. For other possibilities, this feels a little more limited to me. Barbie, just in case, if they really like Barbie, they could sneak it into a spot here. Indiana Jones, maybe. And then Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse I threw in there as well, but yeah, I don't think the Brits, from what I remember, I don't think they nominated Kubo and the Two Strings the year that got in for visual effects at the Oscars, so yeah, not extremely confident that one can pull a spot, but in case it does, I'll name drop it. In the Best Sound category, I have Ferrari, Killers of the Flower Moon, Maestro, Oppenheimer, and The Zone of Interest. This is one of the few categories I think Poor Things could struggle in, so I don't even have that as a possible nominee here. Instead, I'm going Mission Impossible could get in, Barbie could sneak in, Napoleon and Wonka. I would especially, those last two I would be a little more wary of. But Zone of Interest, I'm kind of, hedging a couple bets here. Like, I don't have it in at production design. I do have it in for cinematography, but and I have it in for editing, but and I threw it in for sound, but yeah, so I'm kind of hedging my bet a little bit on that one, getting a nomination over a couple of those other ones. Animated feature is up next. I have The Boy and the Heron. It's only 4 nominees here. Chicken Run, Dawn of the Nugget, Nimona, and Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. Those are my 4. And I feel pretty good about it. Elemental I have on the outside because it didn't get a lot of other nomination possibilities there, like score. It didn't make the long list for Thomas Newman, which BAFTA usually would just name check him, but not in this case. Super Mario Brothers, because that was a big hit, did pretty well here in the UK as well, from what I remember on the box office receipts. And Wish, which has continued, as we saw with Elemental as well, it's continued to get a majority of its cash, its box office receipts, in overseas markets. Even though it's not doing extremely well here in the US, it could be a spot where it lands at BAFTA. But I'm going to keep it out just because it is a 4-film category. If it had a 5th nomination, that's where I see Wish or possibly Super Mario Brothers getting that 5th slot, but not the case. Next up is that tricky Best Casting category that I think we're all still kind of figuring out. My 5 here are All of Us Strangers, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Saltburn. All 5 of them are kind of ensemble movies in one way or another. Feels about right. The 3 I'm leaving out are Anatomy of a Fall, which I think could, that's also a small little cast that could get in. The Holdovers, that's one I would really that one could really sneak in there and get a nomination. I'm going to kick myself when I get that one wrong. And How to Have Sex, just because they might give that one the nod over All of Us Strangers, but I don't think so. I think All of Us Strangers did just fine enough on these long lists that it'll get in over How to Have Sex, where the Brits have their hometown favorites. The adapted screenplay category, my 5 here are All of Us Strangers, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, Poor Things, and The Zone of Interest. I feel really good about those 5, because I think American Fiction is going to struggle here at BAFTA. I don't have it getting into way too many slots. And its win at Critics' Choice I don't think is really going to carry over too far. So, yeah, I have it missing here. And then Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret. That's really the only other one on the long list that jumped out at me. I think these other 5 are feeling really good. For original screenplay, I have Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, Past Lives, Saltburn, and The Holdovers. So this is a spot where I would normally put in How to Have Sex, because it was arguably the biggest British independent film that, or more, British hometown favorite film that got a lot of recognition on the long lists. But I'm leaving it out because I think something like Past Lives is a little more popular. Anatomy of a Fall definitely has done pretty well over here with all European audiences. Saltburn, I think, is going to have just enough behind it. Barbie, of course, we know is a popular one. And The Holdovers, I think they'll give the nod to. So it could be one of the 5, and I could be wrong about it, but I'm just going to leave that one out. Maestro and May December are the other 2 I will name check in case they put them in. Next up will be, and this is where we start getting 6 nominees for the next few categories. Best Supporting Actress, I have Emily Blunt for Oppenheimer, Danielle Brooks for The Color Purple, Claire Foy, All of the Strangers, Sandra Hüller for The Zone of Interest, Rosamund Pike for Saltburn, and Divine Joy Randolph for The Holdovers. And actually, when I first looked at the list, there was, and I actually didn't even write it down later, but I think it's Cara Jade Myers, I think is the name. She was also longlisted, I guess, for Killers of the Flower Moon. I had her in, actually, for that last slot for a while, but then I looked at it again, I'm like, no, with The Zone of Interest, the popularity of that one, and Sandra Hüller, I think she's going to be a double nominee. So I did have the other one in, though. Otherwise, really, after that, all the other 4, I think, legitimately have something of a contention. Jodie Foster for Nyad, she kind of surprised us a little bit with SAG nomination as well. She really hasn't missed a spot yet on these precursors. Julianne Moore for May December, even though that one I don't think went over very well here in the UK, at least with this voting branch, but I'll name drop it in case it happens. And then America Ferrera for Barbie, again in case Barbie overperforms, which has been happening pretty consistently here with these award shows. Really, at SAG, the only one it could have gotten into that it didn't was America Ferrera, but it did pick up that stunt ensemble category, which I was a little questioning of. I was like, could be that one, it could be Killers of the Flower Moon. I ended up going wrong with Killers of the Flower Moon. But that being said, yeah, that could be a spot where Barbie also lands. For supporting actor, my 6 here are Robert De Niro for Killers of the Flower Moon, Robert Downey Jr. for Oppenheimer, Ryan Gosling for Barbie, Paul Mescal for All of Us Strangers, Mark Ruffalo for Poor Things, and Ben Whishaw for Passages. I'm kind of going off because I've seen not very many people picking Ben Whishaw, and Passages has been one. It's been name dropped once or twice here. It's gotten a couple things here and there. I don't know. I just feel like in this category, this could be a spot where they have an opening, so they might give it to a hometown favorite. So that's on me if it's not right. Dominic Sessa for The Holdovers and Jamie Bell for All of Us Strangers, the other two I could see getting in. And here's something I want to you can watch out for. If Paul Giamatti, because I've been when we get to Best Actor, I was going to talk about it then, but I can talk about it now since we talked about Dominic Sessa. If The Holdovers is going to pull off that upset in Best Actor, if Paul Giamatti has it, I think a spot we can really look for here at the Oscars, one key category would be supporting actor. And there's a spot there, if Dominic Sessa, if he misses at BAFTA, and he could become that, because almost every year there's a nominee who comes in who was completely left out, in the cold from those precursor awards. This could be a spot where Dominic Sessa could be one of those nominees. He's in a movie that they're watching, even though he's a younger performer. It's in a movie they're watching, and it's one that they're likely going to give at least one acting win to if Divine Joy Randolph continues on her tear there in supporting actress. So if Dominic Sessa can get in, I think that'll be a huge sign of strength for The Holdovers. That's when I'm going to start buying a little bit more into the Paul Giamatti crowd there for him winning Best Actor. I think that could really help him. We'll move on now to the Best Actress category. My 6 here are Lily Gladstone for Killers of the Flower Moon, Sandra Hüller for Anatomy of a Fall, Greta Lee for Past Lives, Mia McKenna-Bruce for How to Have Sex, Carey Mulligan for Maestro, and Emma Stone for Poor Things. So I'm leaving out Margot Robbie for Barbie. I'm leaving her out at the Oscars as well still. And this one especially is going to be really tough for me because not only has Margot gotten in everywhere so far, let's not forget BAFTA really liked her. And really does still really like her because she got 2 nominations the year of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and the Fox scandal one. Oh God, what was the name of that one? Oh Lord, I can't remember now. What was it? Oh Lord, whatever that one was. I'm totally spacing on the name of it now. She was a double nominee that year in supporting actress, which is a rule that the Oscars have. You can't be nominated against yourself in the same category. You can be a double nominee, in the lead and in a supporting category. You can't be in the same category though. So that's a rule that BAFTA evidently does not have. So it was really, really tough for me to leave her out, but I'm like, I think they like Greta Lee. I think they like How to Have Sex. I think they like that one. Yeah, and I couldn't leave any of those other ones out either. So I'm like, this was really, really tough. But I'm going to be kicking myself a little bit when it's like a Greta Lee that misses, or possibly Mia McKenna-Bruce that misses. I'm going to be kicking myself, and it's going to be like Margot Robbie, damn it. Otherwise, Vivian Oprah for Rye Lane and Annette Bening for Nyad are also possibilities. In Best Actor, I have Bradley Cooper for Maestro, Leonardo DiCaprio for Killers of the Flower Moon, Paul Giamatti for The Holdovers, Cillian Murphy for Oppenheimer, Andrew Scott for All of Us Strangers, and Jeffrey Wright for American Fiction. So I do have him getting in there. Otherwise, look out for Barry Keoghan for Saltburn, Coleman Domingo for Rustin, and T.O.U. for Past Lives. Those are my other 3. The directing category I have up next, and this is going to be Greta Gerwig for Barbie, and again I'm going alphabetical by director here. Jonathan Glazer for Zone of Interest, Yorgos Lanthimos for Poor Things, Christopher Nolan for Oppenheimer, Martin Scorsese for Killers of the Flower Moon, and Justine Triet for Anatomy of a Fall. I feel pretty decent about those 6. I think they like to try to get a mix of male and female directors, so we have a couple female directors in there. Otherwise, look out for Celine Song for Past Lives. She could carry through. Andrew Hay for All of Us Strangers. Definitely look out for him. And really look out for Molly Manning Walker, the director of How to Have Sex. She could break in and steal that spot, possibly even from Greta, if they really, really like it enough. And the 5 films I've selected for Best Film are Anatomy of a Fall, Barbie, Killers of the Flower Moon, Oppenheimer, and Poor Things. So I was thinking Zone of Interest here in place of Barbie, actually. At one point I was. But then I looked at it and I'm like, wait a minute. I've got Zone of Interest in Best British Film, and I've also got it in Best Film Not in the English Language. I don't think I don't recall a film that's been eligible in all 3 categories that has gotten into all 3 at BAFTA since they've been doing these long lists. So I thought about it. I'm like, I don't know if they're going to like it that much. That's a lot. That's a lot. And we do sometimes see like a film win Best Film Overall and Best British Film. That's not totally uncommon, but to be nominated in, 3 film categories, especially if you're qualifying for film not in the English language, I don't know. I don't know if I see that coming through. Now, Anatomy of a Fall it's not eligible for Best British Film, so I see that hitting the 2. Obviously, I have Poor Things in there for Best British Film. I can see that hitting the 2. But otherwise, the other 3, Barbie, Flower Moon, and Oppenheimer, they're all obviously in the mix there. So I was like, I think that's my 5. So I'm leaving out Zone of Interest. I'm also leaving out All the Strangers, which I think is going to get really close. Could be one of the 5 and could just, sneak up on us. And Past Lives. I would say Past Lives is one not to totally discourage and turn away from. It could get a slot. So, by my calculations, I have Oppenheimer and Killers of the Flower Moon tying for most nominations at 14. Then I have Poor Things at 13, so it's really going to be top-heavy with those 3. All 3 of them I have really doing well here. Then I have Barbie at 9, Zone of Interest at 8. I have both All the Strangers and Anatomy of a Fall at 6. I have Maestro at 5, Saltburn at 4, Holdovers, Past Lives, and Napoleon at 3, and then Spider-Man and How to Have Sex both having 2 nominations. So, other than those 3 that'll get a bunch, it's like they're kind of spreading the wealth there a little bit. But, I would actually not be totally shocked if Barbie can break into double digits, if it can get Margot in, if it can get maybe 1 or 2 of those tech categories that I have it missing out on, like film editing, for example, or maybe cinematography. But again, that one in place of Killers of the Flower Moon, I don't quite see happening. That's why I'm leaving it out. And I didn't have it in for film editing either. So I can totally see Barbie getting like an 11 or 10 nominations. So, and I think Killers of the Flower Moon, it's a respected enough thing, and Scorsese's a well enough respected director that even if it only ends up with 12 nominations or 11, I still think that's going to be a good haul for them. Oppenheimer, I see 14, possibly 15 if it can get into the costume design category, but I think that's really about it. I don't see it. I don't think it's actually eligible in any other spot. So I felt like there's maybe one. Yeah, that's maybe the one spot, because if I recall correctly, last year too, that would be about what All Quiet on the Western Front did. It got everything except its supporting actor, if I recall correctly. Something like that. It was like, out of its 15 or 14 possible nominations, it landed all but one of them. So it did very, very well. So Oppenheimer, I see also being in that very similar spot there. Yep, otherwise, like I said, Zone of Interest. That one could even bounce up and get close to the double digits. Very possible there. I don't see Anatomy of a Fall breaking double digits. There's not really way too many places where it was eligible where I didn't put it in. So I don't recall if there's any other spots where that one could get in. Because I have it in like for film editing and stuff, so I don't know again where else that could land. It might have broken in for cinematography. I don't have a full list pulled up, but it maybe cinematography. But it hasn't really been a huge sign for that film so far. All right. So I think that's where I'm at right now. Really, the only big Oscar movie, Best Picture nominee that I see kind of struggling here is American Fiction. It didn't, it got a couple key spots where it needed on the long lists to show that, they're watching it, that they didn't totally skip it. But again, I think other than maybe screenplay and then Best Actor, I don't know where else they're going to give it a spot, because it didn't do, like Sterling K. Brown didn't make it in for supporting actor over here. And, other than that, I don't really see it overperforming over here. But I don't know, stranger things have happened. So, all right, I think that's all I got for now. So we will be back here sometime Thursday, probably later in the day after the nominations have come out, and we'll talk more about them in depth then.